everybody. So I guess we're here today to figure out how to actually solve the scaling problem and make Bitcoin work in about 30 years. But I'm gonna go on a kind of long intro rant here, and then try to let these guys take it from here. But the big problem with Bitcoin is that blockchains suck. They don't scale. They're not a practical solution for any large user base, just based on how they work. And so we have to kind of find a way to take activity that people want to conduct on a blockchain off-chain in a way that still anchors to it and provides the same or similar security guarantees that the blockchain itself does. And really, I want to kind of break this into discussion around the different abstract ways you can do that. So like the two big categories I see are kind of a reactive security model or a stateful security model. And the two easiest examples of this are something like Lightning. Like you lock your Bitcoin into a multisig and start creating this chain of pre-signed transactions. And the entire way that it works is I just pay attention to the blockchain, and if somebody uses a transaction they're not supposed to, I react to it with another one to enforce the correct outcome. Everybody gets the money they're supposed to have. And things like Rollups, which is like a more stateful model. Like you actually update in some way the current distribution of funds efficiently on chain, and people have the equivalent of a pre-signed transaction or one they can make that will just always be able to pull the money they're owed out of that system. And there isn't really a worry about having to react to things because only the correct thing is possible. And kind of the different trade-offs between those two types of systems, the limitations, the benefits. And so I guess, Alex, just to kind of toss it to you first, like what's your thinking in terms of those two classes of how we can actually scale the use of Bitcoin?
Well, it's pretty technical, I think. Like, I mean, how we're going to actually implement what is required. I think a lot of it comes down to the user experiences that we're trying to drive, and I think there'll probably be a variety of solutions. And it just really gets into the weeds of the trade-offs. Like the Lightning Network right now, they're using channels where you have a penalty system. So if somebody tries to kind of take money that they're not supposed to have, you can use a justice transaction to kind of show the network that, oh, actually this money is mine, and even more than that, you can go and take their funds and use their funds for chain fees. So it becomes very complicated and technical, but the solution isn't really part of people's day-to-day experience with the Lightning Network. I think the thing that they really care about is like the second-order effects of what it creates. So how long do I have to be online? Do I have to be online? Do I have to have my run this on my desktop? Do I have to have like a service provider who's helping me watch for these kind of scenarios, or how worried do I have to be? And I think it's kind of like a marketplace-driven solution. Like the ones that are going to win are the ones where it's just people execute and do a great job, and they find the trade-offs that work for people. And I can't really say what's going to win.
And Simanta, Marco?
Yeah. So I think I don't see it as an either/or. Maybe similar to Bosworth, I think it really depends on the type of application, what the intended experience we want to optimize for is, and I think we're working more towards like the stateful route, and looking at the roadmap ahead, we see that rollups and kind of using zero-knowledge proofs and these kinds of new cryptographic primitives provides a really good way to batch a bunch of transactions off-chain, settle that on Bitcoin, and use it as an anchor for trust. And to be able to do basically expand the design space for what's possible to build on and around Bitcoin. Bitcoin scripting is quite limited, and some of the stateful models, approaches like Rollups, aim to expand that programmability kind of design space in allowing a lot of new innovations that we're seeing sort of within, let's say, DeFi or just better payment experiences. All of these things to sort of exist on a layer 2 that still is secured through Bitcoin. And so I think there's natural trade-offs there. We can discuss more, but there are a set of applications that definitely fit that model a lot better. And then other applications that fit the more reactive model better. And hopefully we see plethora of different scaling solutions in 2050.
I think there is also a mix of the two models, where I think reactive model and also a stateful model is where Arc is kind of a bit of both. But I would say definitely Arc is much more similar to Lightning, for example, where you have a reactive security model. Both the server and the client potentially can obtain their own UTXO just reacting to events. I think the interesting part is to not introduce another blockchain, because in the end, like scaling a blockchain with another blockchain, you will even figure out a trustless bridge to anchor your Bitcoin there and moving to another blockchain. You're still feeling it in a separated, let's say, universe. You're not really using UTXO base. So I will say it's interesting to see the limits of using UTXO as your base of word, and of course, Covenant can expand this programmability of Bitcoin script. But yes.
And I think, like Alex, you kind of put the focus on like user experience and how users interact with it. And I think that's really kind of one of the core differences between like a reactive versus a stateful model that's at odds with how scalable these systems can be. Like, for instance, with something like Lightning, you just open a channel once, and there is no set amount of block space that you have to pay for in the ideal case of the system. Like in theory, that could live off chain and avoid using that resource of block space infinitely. Whereas like a stateful system like a rollup, it's going to require constant block space use just to progress the state off chain. And so it's kind of at odds where like the more scalable model is the thing with more friction in the UX, but the thing with like a simpler, easier UX to experience for users, that has a worse dynamic in terms of the cost that's ultimately going to be created by its requirement for block space. Like, do you guys have any kind of thoughts on if it's possible to kind of square that circle there, or is this just like the inherent kind of trade-off there, that the more scalable something is, the more friction you're going to introduce into the UX? Oh, open question.
No, I think I'll speak maybe within the context of like these roll-up systems. There's a lot of different variants, of course. Shinobi talked about the transactions that happen on a roll-up. Roll-up being a layer 2 blockchain where a bunch of transactions are batched. A single digital signature, a proof of those transactions being valid, is posted on Bitcoin, and there's a summary of like that transaction that also needs to be posted on Bitcoin. So this is the data requirement and the kind of scalability friction I think Shinobi is talking about. The data that's posted on Bitcoin is going to be a lot less than the kind of raw transaction data, but there's a scaling limit in terms of how much compression can you kind of have, and it's on the order of estimated 30 to anywhere from 30 to 100x the scalability, which is again limited. How do we actually expand that to everyone in the world? using the limited block space on Bitcoin is unclear within the rollup model. But then there's variants where you can take that compressed transaction data, put it in alternative data availability solutions. It doesn't have to be on Bitcoin. You can still settle the proof through Bitcoin. And this is where maybe the transactions don't have full security, the same exact security as a Bitcoin transaction, but maybe that's okay for certain types of applications that maybe don't need the kind of full settlement security that's available on Bitcoin. There's still a lot of security inherited through the proof being posted, and the proof itself is very small in its fixed size. So, maybe on the rollup side, I guess there's sort of alternative variants of how you can handle data that allow certain types of transactions to be scalable to the world, but reducing some security parameter, and that could be optional for the user.
I don't really see it as divorced. I feel like the security is part of the user experience. So if I'm using a system that could scale to everybody, but it has no security, that's not a good user experience to me. And the user experience that's going to win is the one that people want to use and is executed well. So I feel like if people demand that when they make a payment that is decentralized, that they have the security that they need, that's a system that they're going to use. And if we're thinking about 2050, I think it's hard to say exactly the technical ability that technical details of how those systems are going to work. I mean, that's pretty far in the future. But I think the trend that I want to see is that people don't just ignore the idea that all of your money could just be taken away or just be locked, or you could be subject to these systemic risks. I think that if people start to value using an open network where, especially in a business case, like if I'm building on somebody else's platform and just one day, whatever happens to them, they could just all get shut down by the company themselves or by the layer that they're built on, then my business is impacted. So I think if we can get people to think about that more, then there's going to be more demand for that, and then there's going to be more solutions built on that.
Well, Marco, I kind of wanted to...
Yeah, I also wanted to answer to Shinobi's point when last year, basically service provider like Bolts had to shut down for an entire day because the costs for them to operate their lining operation were too high. So there is also a concept yes, we can have a full trusted solution, but for me, if it's inefficient or not economical to operate, it's basically backwards, right? So it's not really helping or serving the purpose. So for sure, the problem we saw with the current scaling solution is still the blockchain counterfactual, place where you want to see who's right, who's cheating. So you still need to consider that the blockchain has to be used in the moment that is necessary. And in general, I think you really need to not only scale in a vertical way, which Lightning does in a great job. Two peers, they understand each other, they know the liquidity, they can scale vertically as much as they want, but you also need, at the base layer, a way to horizontally scale. And things like channel factories and many other proposals definitely will help in that direction.
That's exactly where I kind of wanted to take things. It's this whole design space I kind of see as a decision between security, cost, and trust model. And it's might not even be possible to really get all three of those things. Did my mic? Okay, there we go. So the dynamic there is kind of just this struggle to find the optimal place. How scalable can we make something to make it affordable for people with the best security model possible? And just kind of in this framework of reactive versus stateful systems, like at least so far with what people have designed and come up with, I just see like kind of an inverse correlation here. Like the more scalable you make a system, the more complexity and friction you introduce to try to maintain a good security model.
Yes, complexity is always, something you need to pay it, right? So complexity is needed. So you should always try to use it when actually allow you to scale. But sometimes complexity gets at that point is too much, and it makes the good purpose, the good intention of the base system not actually working, not actually solving the problem.
I think we can't let security like totally stop us from improving like the usability and the scalability. I think that was actually kind of the insight that Satoshi had when making Bitcoin that was missing from a lot of other attempts. In that the proof of work, it doesn't really stop you from double spending. You can certainly double spend. It's just like there's a cost that people can reason about. And unlocking that, I think, was a key to saying, okay, let's get past that one hurdle, and now we'll go on to the next one, and we can improve that as we go on.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what I mean is like, are we going to bump into a wall where really the only way to continue scaling is make concessions in terms of security? And like, how far are we going to slide down that slope if that's the case?
We maybe forgot, but there was a very loud camp back in the years which saying increase the block. So there is also another option with saying, oh, okay, we are still using the minor model. We're just making, increasing the block. But I think that's a taboo, right, in the Bitcoin community.
Have the security trade-off. If we increase the block sizes, you're decreasing the security of the entire base layer. So I think that's something that we also have to think about is like, we all want to make second layer systems, but it's very key that the first layer system behaves in a predictable way. That like that's our greatest tool is that we have a predictable first layer that can be used as an arbitrator in the worst case scenario.
No, absolutely, and we did that. Like with SegWit, we actually increased the actual space we can use. So we actually did that in a way, in a more smarter way, more elegant way. But absolutely, like more you increase the block, you also you're not decentralized enough because people cannot use cheap commodity hardware to validate the entire block. So definitely, there is always a trade-off, and I think nobody has a magic wand to fix all the problem of Bitcoin. But yes, there is for sure many.
I think it's also a matter of like exactly like the L1 being the foundational, like Bitcoin is the trust anchor. This is the arbiter, and that needs to be solid, and then have a bunch of different second layer systems with taking different trade-off space and sort of let the market figure out where which applications people are actually going to kind of which second layer solutions to use. I think any of the sort of on-chain second layer infrastructure solutions that we're building here certainly it's more trust minimized than like going straight to a custodian and going using that solution. And I think the market sort of will see which trade-off. I don't think that the perfect kind of full security best kind of like the same security as Bitcoin L1 transaction for infinitely scalable transactions on second layer systems can exist. I mean, part of it is there's some risk associated with additional code that you're already using for the second layer system and so on. But I think it'll certainly be a lot better than kind of using fully custodial services for all these kind of financial applications that we want to use Bitcoin for.
And there's going to be a range, right? There's going to be like 1,000 flowers blooming, that's going to meet all sorts of different people's needs and expectations. And we're not going to converge on a single solution. We're going to have many solutions that fits many different people's needs. And the Lightning Network is already like that. There's lots of different types of Lightning Network already.
Actually, the last 5 minutes here, I think this would be a good thing to touch on. If each of you kind of want to go through your thoughts on different solutions actually being composable and interoperable. I think we're all on the same page.
I think, like, on my side, I really see Arc and Lightning be complementary, even though maybe people think they're like totally two different solutions. And I really see how, as I said before, like how we can combine the two things where we can horizontally scale. So potentially you can have virtual channels, right? So channels are not open on the base layer, so we remove the cost potentially, right, for operators to basically open channel, rebalance them, but you do it on another layer. So potentially you're really combining these two models, are very similar to them. They're UTXO, they speak the same language. You're not going in a different, I would say, tooling set. So I think that's for me the most interesting combination that I'm looking forward in the next years.
Simanta, Alex.
The scaling limit that I think we really have to think about is actually not the block space and not chain efficiency. I actually think that, like in terms of 2050, the scaling limit is the Bitcoins, because we can improve our efficiency a lot by optimizing the code. So much. I mean, we've almost done nothing in the grand scheme of things to get better chain efficiency. But we can never get more than 21 million Bitcoins. And that's already a huge limiting factor that we see in these second layer systems, because somebody needs to make these systems liquid, and they need to have enough coins with enough people that they can service those users. So it's not just users per blockchain byte. It's also users per liquidity allocation. And I think that's going to be probably the next area where things compete, is not just like, okay, what's my onboarding cost? I think everybody's going to get to low onboarding cost. I think that's very feasible with dedication. But what we're going to see is competition between how much capital is required per user. And I think that there's no way around a certain amount of capital per user. Like, Bitcoin is needed to be the engine of this. Like, you need to have coins locked in a channel for the channel to work. But how much is kind of variable potentially.
Samantha, you have any thoughts?
On the interoperability between, so I'll speak on rollups again. The focus there is really, I mean, it's scalability to some extent, but also expanding, programmability. How do we enable people to build whatever they want and sort of program Bitcoin, make Bitcoin programmable? It's expanding the design space for creating contracts, maybe building borrow lend solutions, building keyless payments. There's been some amazing innovation actually happening in other blockchains around just radically simplified payment experiences. We want to bring that to Bitcoin, and those experiments should exist on layer 2s on Bitcoin. And so rollups sort of focused on that expressivity, and as part of that, a big part of that is how do we enable better privacy to transact Bitcoin. And I think the natural synergy maybe with Lightning and like channel-based approaches is the focus there is more about velocity of payments, and I think that whether it's how we bridge between Bitcoin and a roll-up solution, maybe we use like atomic swap, submarine swap, faster ways to kind of bring BTC in and out of these systems, or the assets that exist on the roll-up, like they can be interoperable with Lightning and kind of move around in the Lightning network. These things definitely are interesting areas of synergies, and we'll be exploring that more for sure.
All right, so it sounds like in order to actually make this work in about 30 years, a lot of things have to get glued together and actually made to stay working. Well, I guess you guys want to try and do a quick final thoughts, and let's not try to throw the whole AV team off running over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to stay super iterative. Like, we can't just design things in, a silo. We need to be super connected to what people are doing, and we can't just like design for 2050. We need to design for next year and the year after that.
Definitely. And again, kind of reiterate my point earlier of like, I think we're working on different approaches to scaling on Bitcoin, but I don't really see it as competing at all. I think the competition is, anytime you want to do payments or any kind of financial applications with Bitcoin, like, do you have to go to a custodian, which is less accessible, which is, loses the properties of Bitcoin around censorship resistant, Caesar resistant, these properties that are very important. Like that's the competition, I think, and we should see a lot of different approaches to actually scaling natively on Bitcoin, hopefully interoperable as well.
I vouch for both. We are Team Bitcoin, so I think we're going to make it.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for joining me for this chat. I hope everybody enjoyed.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here at the Bitcoin Magazine news desk at Bitcoin Amsterdam. I'm Frank Corva, the business and political correspondent for Bitcoin Magazine, and I am joined to my left by Matt Crosby, lead analyst at Bitcoin Magazine Pro, as well as Sam Abbasi, CEO of Hoseki. I want to kick it over to you first, Matt. We just heard about ways to scale Bitcoin, Lightning being one of the biggest ways, right? The biggest L2 right now in the Bitcoin space. What sort of Lightning data can we get via Bitcoin Magazine Pro?
Well, we can see the capacity in Bitcoin terms and US dollar terms of the Lightning Network, as well as the amount of nodes that are actually running and supporting the Lightning Network. And what's been really interesting over the past few months, even though we've had this very choppy, solidation, boring price action, let's be honest, we've still seen the number of nodes and capacity grow. So clearly this scaling solution is still growing in popularity.
Love that. And we're about to move on to a panel right now where we're going to be talking about Bitcoin ETFs, a very hot topic this past year. Sam, can you tell us a little bit about Bitcoin ETFs and how Hoseki, the work that you do with Hoseki, relates to the ETFs?
Sure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
We basically are sort of like a source of light that's trying to shine as much exposure as we can on these traditional financial products that typically are incredibly opaque. Simply the native properties that Bitcoin offers are so different than traditional financial assets. And though TradFi is bridging itself into Bitcoin, we think a lot of education, a lot of tooling still needs to be built in order to make it a true Bitcoin financial product. So what we do is we provide real-time transparency on the underlying Bitcoin. The nature of custody is obviously different. How you can hold Bitcoin is different. Right. Self-custody versus custodians and sort of the array of combinations you can do in that space. Yep. And so what we do is provide as much transparency, as much visibility as possible in this underlying asset.
Yeah, I love it. And so with the ETFs now, so to just clarify for the audience, so you buy a share of your securitized version of Bitcoin via an ETF, but you can then see via the work that Hoseki does the proof of reserves, right? That these people are actually holding the real Bitcoin behind the scenes.
Exactly. This is no different than having Bitcoin on an exchange in that sense. You're not holding the asset yourself. You're relying on, in this case, an ETF issuer who's relying on a custodian themselves. And so, we think there's a lot of systemic risk. A lot of these ETFs are being custodied with a single custodian, and we think the risk profile there is just, it's so different compared to everything else. And that's basically why we exist.
Amazing. And do you think that there's a lot of companies just broadly in the Bitcoin space or that are now adopting Bitcoin that feel that, you know what, I really understand Bitcoin, I understand its fundamental properties, I want to have something like Hoseki be a part of what I do as a company so that I can sort of embody the Bitcoin ethos? Are they thinking that way to maybe attract people to use whatever product they're offering?
So our clients like using us because it really sets them apart. Frankly, from like a marketing perspective, it really conveys that they're a more sophisticated actor in the space.
Okay. Interesting. Very, very cool. Well, we are about to head back to the main stage, ladies and gentlemen. Again, here with Bitcoin Magazine Pro lead analyst Matt Crosby, Sam Abbasi, CEO of Hoseki. We will be back right after this. Over to the main stage.
Is your company ready for the next evolution in financial strategy? Bitcoin for Corporations is your partner in securing the future of your business. With exclusive membership benefits, our comprehensive masterclass, and a network of trusted service providers, we provide the insights and resources to help you incorporate Bitcoin into your financial strategy, ensuring stability and long-term value. Strengthen your business. Innovate with confidence. Bitcoin for Corporations, protecting your treasury and positioning you for the future.